everyone that is joining us today. If you had joined us previously, Dr. Patrick is coming back to us. Her initial webinar was on how to apply to the federal government. And this time she will be speaking about the art of interviewing, which a lot of us coming in new to the workforce or coming back need some practice and some tips on how things have changed and what are best practices. So we thank Dr. Patrick for joining us again and all of you for coming back to hear more about her. If it is your first time joining us, I want to tell you a little bit about Dr. Patrick. She currently serves as the director of the California Office of STEM Engagement at Ames Research Center and Armstrong Flight Research Center. Dr. Patrick, how are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Well, I'm excited to have you back. I see that Raul is loading up your presentation. And while he's doing that, would you like to tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my background is a technical background in engineering. Did that for several years, worked at Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas as a flight controller for the space station program. So I can attest that I never heard the words, Houston, we have a problem. Did not hear those words, which I'm super glad. I had the opportunity to go into our Office of STEM Engagement, which is where I reside right now. I've worked with minority serving institutions, underrepresented groups, and currently serving the California offices, as you stated previously. So super excited. It's been a great journey and glad to be here.
Thank you, Dr. Patrick. I see that your presentation is now up, so I will let you get started.
Awesome. So if you could go to the next slide. I always like to kind of do this disclaimer, hey, the information that I'm sharing doesn't guarantee a job selection. I always have to admit, hey, I'm an engineer, I'm a project manager, I am not a human capital specialist. So I can't give you that information from that aspect. All of this information is based on experience. And I would say a high portion of this content I actually found online. And I want to give credit to where credit is due. They don't give me any kickback or anything, but I pulled a lot of this is from the Muse, and definitely encourage you to look at SER's national website as well as the Muse. There's a lot of great information literally at both to hone in on helping you, perfect those skills. So if you participated with me with the resume portion, we talked about getting in the car. This particular time, we're going to talk about being the star. So if you go to the next slide, and of course, I live in the land of acronyms. So the STAR interview method is really a way of how do I phrase my statements, my information in a way that's clear and concise so that those that are listening to me really are able to understand and assess my capabilities, what skills I bring, and the like. And I want to make note, I have seen a lot of great resumes, but watch those individuals get to the interview and just see them do horrible interviews. So interviewing, just like resume writing, is a skill, and it's something that you have to practice at. It's not something you're just going to do all of a sudden. You really should um, uh, practice interviewing in order to kind of perfect that way to deliver your content. So STAR stands for situation, task, action, and result. Very similar to CAR, but this is in this aspect, CAR was challenge, action, and result. This is how you verbalize that statement. So you'll have an interview question and say, tell me about a time when blah, 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 or give me an example of X, Y, and Z. And so you want to kind of start out by framing the situation. When I held this particular position, when I held the position as a flight controller for the space station program, I was assigned to monitor the electrical power system, and I sat on console. Again, this is what I did. I created documentation for astronaut training, I drafted, such and such, I conducted whatever that thing is. And as a result, it resulted in safe, crew safety or whatever the case may be. Um, but it's a whole way of framing it. I can tell you this as an individual who's interviewed people or you know i- candidates before. It is very evident to me when I know somebody's using the STAR method and when they're not. When I hear that statement about when I held the position of, that gives me keen knowledge of knowing that they're using STAR at that point. If you go to the next slide. So here's another example again, not my example. This is from the website. Hey, tell me about a time when you had to be very strategic in order to meet all of your priorities. And of course, the response in my previous sale role, when I had the position of blah, 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 that particular thing that always identifies the situation. From there, you want to talk about the task. You know, what were you assigned? The goal was to this thing and that thing. The I was assigned to deliver this presentation through SCR national events. What was the thing that you were tasked? And then a key very similar to your resume, you want to talk about the actions that you perform. So maybe you were assigned to work in a team to achieve this particular goal. The next statement really needs to focus in on what is it that you did. As a part of the team, I was responsible for delivering this part of the presentation or this widget, to the project, or this you know, information to, the doctor, the person, or whatever. You really want to focus on what was that thing that you were assigned to do. And as a result, what was the result? Everyone was informed properly because I did what I was supposed to, even though you don't say it like that. But you talk about in the aspect of everyone achieved success, um, because you held up your actions that you needed to, for the success of the team. If you can go to the next slide. So this is the key here. And when you're thinking about, you have that star and you can think about the task and you can think about that action and you can think about the result. But this is the key, very similar to when writing a resume. Questions are always generally focused towards skills. You know, we're trying to evaluate you to a skill. So I kind of always tell individuals I wouldn't spend so much time talking the specifics unless that matters, and you'll see that here in a second. But talking the specifics, think about the skill that that particular question is trying to identify from you and really answer from that vantage point. So you may use the same example, but you can identify different skills in that example of what you've displayed, what you can do, in that aspect, and that's not bad. You can come back to it. Um, a lot of times resumes will start out with personal questions. Tell me about yourself. What are your career goals? you know, how does this job align with what you're trying to achieve? And I would say this, you always kind of have to have in mind that old, I call it age old question of what are your strengths and weaknesses. A lot of times that question is not asked, but you still want to have it prepared. And you want to make sure your weakness is not something like, um I strive for perfection. Everybody hopefully strives for perfection. So that can't be your weakness. Really to do some introspective thought and really think about What is your weakness? And anytime you present a weakness, what you want to follow that up with is, how are you trying to mitigate it? What are you doing actively to mitigate that this thing is, is a weakness and that you're trying to overcome it? That speaks huge volumes. An introspective individual that is trying to make themselves better. Any employer would love that, because in essence it says that, hey, you may do something wrong, but I know because you're an introspective person who's always trying to do better, you probably won't do it again, even if you did it wrong the first time. Every employer likes that type of person. So always, there might be some personal questions, why are you the best candidate? There's a set of questions that can come forward as far as leadership. So explain the situation where you've served as a leader, or how individuals have responded to you in leadership. Again, I've actually had the question, how would people, what 3 words would people use to describe you? And I was like, whoa, okay, good question. And so it's really about, again, a self-awareness of, who you are, how you lead, and how is that perceived by others. You can go to the next slide. Some of the other skills that you'll get questions in are in teamwork. Tell us about a group project that you've participated in. People are looking to see, how do you interact with teams? Do you blame people? Do you take ownership for even your own faults? Do you work? Do you want a person that works with others, but you don't want to hear the person who tries to be the superhero, like, oh, this person wasn't doing their position, and so I did it all. No, nobody does it all. So, really think about what they're looking for when they're asking about that teamwork question. They're looking for someone who, in essence, it goes back to the playground, that plays well with others. I know I would say I've been talking to a couple of individuals, and I've literally heard literally heard them say, having the skills alone is not, the deciding factor, but you're wanting to find someone who will be a good fit for the team, who's a team player. The other thing, that another skill that questions will come through, is that your flexibility. Now, this is really huge. If depending on how dynamic of an environment you're applying for, but things change. I mean, it can easily change really quickly, and people want to know that you can deal with change fairly, decently. And so you get the question, name a time that the scope of the project completely changed. How did you handle it? Um, and this is a huge one. I've asked this question: name a time that you've missed a deadline, and really the question, the response goes with that is, how did you handle that, and what did you do? And so really for that, you're looking for a person who will admit that they did something wrong, and then they will, own it, and then take ownership of how to fix it, and then try to make a plan and actually implement the fix. That is a person that you want on the team. The individual who just tells you, it says, Melissa, you know, um, I missed the deadline and I just didn't know what to do. And so, I didn't do anything. you know, you're sitting there like, really? Like, no way do you want this individual on your team, because you want the person who says, I missed the deadline and it was a huge oversight on my part. They sent it to me. They told me, they contacted me, but it was just off my radar. And so I initially went to the person that needed it and my supervisor, so that they would both be aware. I noted whether I was able to, mitigate it, and I was able to create a secondary solution, and it made everybody happy, or I never did it again. This is what I did to make sure that I did not miss those deadlines in the future. That's all totally acceptable answers. Those are the kind of responses that you're looking for. You can go to the next slide. Some other areas of skills, and I'll try to hit some high points because I want to get to allow you the opportunity to ask questions, is that you do get time management questions, as far as how you're able to manage multiple responsibilities. You do get communication questions, and sometimes, depending on what kind of position you're applying to, you might actually get a question on, you might be requested to do a writing sample on the spot. It just really depends on the type of position that you're applying for. So you kind of want to be prepared for something like that. You can go to the next slide. Um, and here, the key here is that with all of the different types of skills that those questions are focused towards, the thing to make note of is that you really want to be prepared. There are times when you'll get a specific, a question specific to that position. It may be tell us how to create the widget, X, Y, and Z, or something in that vein. As far as trying to identify that unique skill. In the position specific section, I would say one of the key things there is that sometimes you're looking to see, did people do their homework? Do you really know who we are as a company? Do you understand the job you're applying for? And the like. And so what I've shared with SER National, which they'll be able to share with you, is the interview cheat sheet, which I absolutely love. And again, it's off of the web, so it's not something that I created, but it's a really good document that allows for you to kind of uh, do the research and write down, what position am I looking for? Who will I be interviewing with? Um, and the like, so that you are really ready for this interview and you've prepared and the like. And you can go to the next slide. The thing that I would share as far as questions, this is my absolute favorite question. I generally try to ask this question, um, and it's just basically, hey, is there anything in the interview that you want to share that didn't come out previously? This is a huge key. And even if they don't ask you this, there's usually time for you to ask questions or you can share anything. It's still the same as this question. The reason why I like this question is because one of the things that I'll do with my interviews is that I will identify, and I write this down in my little interview book. What are the three things that I want to ensure they leave knowing about me? And it is during this question, or even when they ask me if I have questions, that I will reiterate what are those three things. It may be my passion to the position, my commitment to the mission, and my flexibility, of whatever. Whatever those three main things that I want to ensure um, they understand before I walk out that door. That is what I try to make sure that question will do, and they'll know. You can go to the next slide. The other key, whenever you get these questions, is to ensure you answer all of the questions. The questions that I've shared with you are fairly simple, but these questions can become really complex quickly. And so here's an example of a question, and let me say this is a real question. And I in the second part of the slide, I show you what am I writing down. And I should have said this initially. It is absolutely okay if you take notes during your meeting, during your interview, because you want to ensure you understand what they're asking you to, their question, and you want to make sure that you answer all of those parts. So this is a question. Tell us a time when you've had to balance multiple priorities, multiple tight deadlines, and even multiple customer expectations. What are the challenges you face? How did you overcome them? or if you weren't successful, what did you learn from them? I wrote the question right there. This is how I'm writing that down. Tell me about a time, and I'm writing multiple priorities, tight deadlines, some customer expectations, because these are the key things that I know I need to ensure that I address in my response, to ensure that I've addressed the full question. I've been in an interview where I've asked them, and there's no number, but I've said, you're nervous, you're excited, you're thinking, and I've asked them, could they repeat the question at least 3 times? And it's just because it's so much, and I'm trying to process and hear the question, hear what they're asking, and make sure that my potential example is going to address what they're asking. So you can ask them to repeat the question, because it's key that you answer all of the questions. I mean, answer all parts of the question. It will be noted against you if you don't. So you want to make sure you're answering all of the question, which really boils down to going to the next slide. The main thing that you have to do with all of this is practice, practice, practice. You know, you want to have it, almost like a well-oiled machine. Most interviews really last anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes. So, and they will have anywhere from 5 to 8 questions. So that really is giving you about 5 to 6 minutes for each question. So you should practice. Can I do a teamwork question and give it to you concisely in 5 minutes? I've seen people ramble. I've seen them use up their time. And so you want to make sure that you're managing your time, and that you're able to respond clearly and concisely to the interview question. So with practice, those mock interviews are absolutely the best. If you can get anyone to do a mock interview for you, I definitely highly encourage it. If you can go to the next slide. So just kind of rounding us out into what are those do's, and don'ts for interviewing. One is that if you can, and I want to clarify, not in a stalker way, you want to know who your panelists are. It's always good to have a perspective of who are the people interviewing you. Somebody is the selecting official generally. And then, what are those other individuals representing in order to give feedback to the selecting official? There's a reason why there's a panel. So you want to know if you can, if you can figure out information on them, on the interview panel. You want to do research on the position. Again, you might get that question just to see if you really know what this position is, who we are as a company or organization, and practice the STAR. All practice, 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 so that you can ensure that you're answering all aspects of the question. And the funny thing is, I tried to figure out don'ts, and the only thing I was like, don't forget to do all the do's. That was my don't. Like, don't not do these things. I know that's a double negative, right? So, anyways, make sure that you're doing those, and then going to the next slide is don't forget the value of small talk. There's nobody I've ever heard participate in a panel and said, we didn't hire them because they complain about the weather. Nobody says that. So weather is always a great way to do small talk. What's the weather there? It's hot, it's cloudy here, it's warm there. You could use minimum research. Again, you don't want to be a stalker. But if you see something that has potential commonality and is true for you, you can bring that up. I've been on interviews, and it's funny, if you can notice that I'm an earring person. I've been on interviews where before we really got started, one of the panelists was like, I need those earrings, So small talk can be in any form. And if you're connected, if it's already close to, you work in that area and this is just a promotion, or this is in another area in your same company, then you can talk about office stuff or organization stuff, or or the like. But just, don't forget the value of that small talk conversation. The Go to the next slide. This is really, I have two more slides and I'm wrapping up and we're going to go to questions. This really is key. Ask questions at the end. I kind of, you're given that opportunity. I won't say that you don't get a position if you don't ask a question, but it always kind of gives you an inclination of who's really thinking about this position if they have questions. And the first question, if they don't already tell you, is you should ask them what is the next, what's the process, what happens next, just a time frame, when do you expect to hear anything, or the like. You can even flip a question to them that they may have asked you or may not, just depends, but you can say, hey, what do you see as the biggest challenges for this position, from their perspective? There may or may not be. You just want to get, an idea of what do they see as some early wins, some challenges, and the like. If it's something technical and you can ask, then that's perfectly fine. But you also, I've seen people ask questions about the office culture or what's valued or office makeup or the like. So there's all kinds of different questions that you can ask out there, but it's always really good to ask a question at the end. And then my last slide, if you go to the next slide, this is really huge, and we don't really think about the value of this, is really follow up. And you had that interview and you're not, you're kind of done, and you're not even really sure of how things went. It's always good to really send that thank you note. Does it make or break, break you from getting a position? I wouldn't necessarily say that, but it is a very good practice, usually within 48 hours of the interview. And you really want to focus back in on something that you talked about or discussed, or just, or, so that they will remember who you are. And you just say hello to the person. Thanks again for your time, blah, blah, blah. As I mentioned, would really be excited and humbled to have this position, excuse me, and the like. And then if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. Thanks. It can be as simple, not a page and a half or anything like that, but it's just always really good to be in the practice of a follow up. If my grandmother was here, she would say you should tell people thank you. You know, send them a thank you note. This is the exact same thing of that, is that they gave you the opportunity to interview and you want to just really take the time to say thank you. So that's it. I appreciate your time. I'll turn it back over to Melissa to see if there's any questions, and hopefully it was thorough and enjoyable at the same time.
Thank you, Dr. Patrick. You had some great tips. While you were speaking, I thought about certain interviews that I was in when I was nervous, or I should have said that while I was going through your star um, uh, choice and plan of what to do. I think you're definitely right. I think the more prepared you are for an interview, the more confident you are and the more confident you sound. And so thank you for sharing that with our audience. We do have some questions that were coming in while you were speaking. One of them is, you spoke about the questions at the end of the interview, and this person, Andre, is asking, how do you feel about turning the tables to the interviewer to express interest in the position or company you're applying to?
To say that part of the question again, to express interest to what?
To the company and the position that you're applying to. So I'm assuming they're asking at the end, once their interview is finished and they're asking if there's any questions, this person wants to know if it's okay to turn the tables and become the interviewer versus the interviewee and ask questions from the interviewer.
Um, there's probably a gray line to that. Um, I'm just gonna be honest. You don't want to sound cocky, you know, because they already got the job. You the one trying to get it, so you, you don't want to sound too. But I will say this: I've been in an interview, and the question that came back to us was, to each of us that were on the panel, what did we like about working at at the particular, while I work um, for the government. But they were like, what do you like working? Why do you like working for your company, or what is it that you like most about working for your company? Which was a pretty cool question. So, um, we kind of were trying to answer. A lot of times you don't have that much time left. If you've done a good job, you're not going to have that much time left. You're going to have some time, but I think it just depends on what the question is. But you definitely want to kind of pose a question there. So hopefully that helps. If not, definitely go ahead and put in the chat, hey, clarifier, and I could definitely try to clarify that.
Thank you, Dr. Patrick. Another question that came in is, what can I do to calm my anxiety during and before the interview?
Yeah, so the funny part of it is practice. Practicing really does help you calm it down because I you know I normally kind of have it close by me where I can pull it up and show you, but I actually have a interviewing notebook, and it's where I have taken notes on myself on how I'm going to deliver my content. And because you're so comfortable in delivering that content, that is what kind of calms you down, um, because you kind of already know, okay, if this is a teamwork, or then I can answer in this way, and so it kind of calms you down. The other aspect is knowing what I want to ensure that they understand about me before I leave. Then that kind of keeps me calm, so that just as Melissa was saying, I can get out of that, oh, I should have said. No, I've already written down what are my key things that I really want to say, so that you know what it is about me, to that to do that. The other thing that I would make note of is that small talk. Small talk helps me. If I can have a informal conversation about the weather, or as I stated earlier about my earrings, if you can garner a smile or something, then that just kind of calms me down, just in general. But that preparation preparation is a huge calmer. Even if you're nervous, because you've prepared, you can still kind of deliver the content, and as you're doing that, it'll probably calm you down, within your interview. So good question.
Thank you, Dr. Patrick. And somebody wants you to go back and talk about the CAR acronym that you used in the past. What does that mean again?
Oh yeah, so CAR is challenge, action, and result. So very similar to STAR. So challenge would be the T of STAR. You're talking about your task, you're talking about your challenge. A is the same for both of them, STAR and CAR. It's about actions, talking about the actions that you've completed. And then the R is the same as results. You're talking about the results that that were achieved because of your work, that you've done in the past. So CAR is about putting it down on paper. STAR is about talking and sharing it, within an interview, but very similar, in model. Good question.
Thank you, Dr. Patrick. We do have a question. It's kind of two-part. On applications, when you have to answer, have you ever been convicted of a felony? And you explain that on an application. Is that something that an interviewee should touch upon at the interview, or not because they weren't asked about it?
Yeah, nah. Yeah, once you make that designation on that paper, and they still call you in for an interview, then we all know. So it's irrelevant. At that point, what I'm looking for is the person who has the skill. I want to know that you can do the work that I need you to do. So that aspect of your past is just irrelevant. So yeah, once you've kind of put it down on paper, no, you don't have to bring it up in the interview at all. Just focus on showing them that you're the right person for the position because you have the skill set to do the job. Good
If you
question.
are asked to explain, um, how much detail do you go into? Do you kind of just say the same thing that you said on the application?
Yeah, so that's kind of, I'm going to say, there's a part of this I'm going to say I don't know. And that's because I really do work in the federal government. And in my mind immediately said, I can't legally ask you that question. But I know in the private sector, there's a difference. Um, uh, so let me do a borderline answer of the I don't know, but let me give the recommendation of think of it very much like the question of you made a mistake and how did you fix it? You missed the deadline, you know, and I would focus on stating the fact of the mistake, but then going into the mitigation. How do I ensure that this is no longer a part of who I am and what I do? And I would look to amplify and emphasize um, the aspect of how I don't do those things or how I have removed myself from that or of the like. And again, going back to the skill of admitting the failure, the impact, and identifying the workaround. How do I get to the next milestone or the like? So that would be my recommendation. But again, I like I said in my mind, we can't. I don't. You can't answer that. You can't ask that question. So
Thank you, Dr. Patrick. Now, you said something very important that a lot of us are afraid to mention and talk about, and that's failures. But um, we also know that with failure comes knowledge.
mhm.
And so, what can you tell our audience about being more comfortable in speaking about failures and what they learn from them?
Yeah. So that is huge. Because it is such you're right. We're kind of taught, you know, to be perfect or don't admit you're wrong or the like. And it's so the opposite because I'm gonna keep it simple. The person who doesn't admit they're wrong they're like a liar to you. And then like nobody you can't function from there. You can't because then I don't have trust. And trust is the number one aspect that makes that supervisor employee relationship work, makes team member relationship work is trust. And so the thing to kind of really think about is that there literally is nobody that is perfect. Like nobody. I don't care what they say. Nobody is perfect. We all have made a mistake, just period. We all have made some type of mistake. And we're going to make other mistakes. We're going to miss something. We're going to not do something. We're going to say the wrong thing. We're just going to do it. And so it is very key in the ability to admit that it was an error. But that's what you're admitting, the error. It's not a reflection of you. You're not making a statement of your character or any of that. And that's the key is really focusing on the error and leaving it with that and then moving on to the mitigation. Because most people want to know that it's not going to happen again. That's really the focus is that you want to know that it's not going to happen again. Um, but I know we're SER nationals, but I will say that skill, it'll take you through life It'll help you stay married. Whatever. I mean, it's just it's a relationship aspect of who we are as people in that ability to admit the error. And again, I want to clarify, it's not you're not it's not an admission of character or person. It's just an admit of the error, whatever that error was, and you focus it towards that thing. Because you're not saying anything about you, but I think hopefully I've conveyed that pretty well.
Yes, thank you so much. Another question that we have is being bilingual a plus for any job, and is it okay to say it during an interview even if you're not asked?
Um, so um let me say being bilingual is a plus. Yes, I think so. That's and I'm gonna say that's my opinion. Um, I'm thinking that somewhere in your resume you should have that. Like that should be in your resume. Let's do that first as a clarifier. Um, if it's in your resume, then there's no need to necessarily bring it up in that regard. It depends on what kind of if you get the background question, that personal question, then there's a way to make note of something like that in the background question. If you get the question of, tell me about yourself, or, why is this position important to you, and da 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 da. So you can wrap that in there as a part of the importance to you for the position. I want to ensure this, that, and the other, and being bilingual will help me not only be able to reach X, but I can reach Y, and blah blah blah. So you wrap it into something, but you're not making it as a statement as that I'm bilingual and the like. But I would still go back to the first statement, is that it should be on your resume. Like you should really ensure that it's on your resume. Good question.
Thank you, Dr. Patrick. We have another one here. When interviewing, the interviewer can see that I am older. Is it anything that should be mentioned about me being a senior?
Oh, no. No, if you can do the job, it doesn't matter what's your age. What's your age? You just want to make sure you convey to them your capabilities and your ability to be able to do the position. Um, and you should not be concerned about your age as well. Yeah, I would just really emphasize that your age should not be a barrier, and you don't necessarily want to be concerned about that. You want to show that you have the skill set to do the position, and ensure that they understand you have the skill set to do the position, and that should be where everything stops from there. So, really good question. But that should not be something that is of concern. As long as you have the skill, you're there to do the work.
Thank you, Dr. Patrick. Now, something, and maybe some people haven't experienced the panel interview. I know that's kind of something new that's happened in the last couple of years, where teams get to be part of the hiring process. What can you tell our audience about the panel interview if they have not experienced it themselves?
Yeah, so you're right. Panel interviews are becoming more and more common. Some of it is really about accountability, ensuring that selections aren't biased, and the like. But just as you noted, that sometimes team members are able to, again, that goes to that statement that I said earlier. People can have the skill, but people are looking to see, are you a good fit for the team? Um, so in that regard, I think is in if you're in person, receive the question from the individual, but make sure you're talking to everybody. Everybody is listening for the answer. It's a little easier with with technology the way we are in now, because really all you want to do is make sure you're looking at the camera. and not necessarily looking at the picture. That's it. Because see, this is me looking at the picture, but me looking at the camera looks more like me talking to you. And so you want to ensure you're looking at the camera, which is another art in itself, um, to 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 ensure that you're doing that. But the panel interview is doing the same thing as the individual one, looking for those skills to be displayed. So, really good question.
And I know right now most people are doing interviews virtually, but in person, you mentioned something really important, thank you notes. When you're having a panel interview, what is the proper way of collecting everyone's information so that you can send that thank you note to all the individuals?
Good question. Um, in general, I'm going to say general, if you are being selected, there there is usually a meeting notice that'll be I mean being interviewed, not selected. Being interviewed, there's a meeting notice that'll be sent out, and in that meeting notice will list the participants who will be participating um, in the interview. So that's one way. The other way, and there's no control, is that there's usually some POC. There's somebody that you're communicating with who setting up the interview or making sure you know the technology. There's somebody. If you don't have any other person's information, then you can send it to that person and ask them would they pass it along. That's just as good as it gets. There's nothing wrong with that. I think it's just the fact that you were trying to. Um, but now with technology the way it is, if you have a meeting notice, you really do have the list of those people that are going to be participating. And so you have their email address and you should be able to pick it up from there. So really good question.
Thank you, Dr. Patrick. Now, I do see that somebody would like for you to go over slide 14 again. Raul, I don't know if you can put that back up there. That's slide 15. There you go. Can you go
Okay.
over this slide again, Dr. Patrick?
Sure. So this is the asking questions at the end. Again, managing your time. Interviews are about 30 to 45 minutes. You have about 5 to 8 questions. So you're working with about 5 to 6 minutes for each question. You get to the end and they'll ask you, hey, do you have any questions for us? One question that if they don't go ahead and share this with you, you should ask them is what is the process like? What happens next? So they ask you if you have any questions, you should say, yeah, I'm just curious. I know you're doing interviews. Um, what happens next? Or what is the time frame for selection? Or when do you anticipate um, letting the candidates know? Or, anything about timeline. That's what you're going after. What is the timeline? And they may not give you explicit in the next 2 weeks or whatever, but you get something. The other kind of question is asking them a question from their perspective. What do you see as will be the biggest challenge for this position? Some positions have challenges, some don't. They're just needing to fill somebody to do the work that's really there. Um, you can ask them, hey, can you identify what you think would be an early win for this position? What do they think would be, oh, you're doing something really great with this particular thing. As I noted previously, I've had the question asked to us, what is it that we like about our jobs or about our company? That's a perfectly cool question. You're trying to get an understanding of the culture. Do they even like their jobs? You know, um, and so the last ones are in that same area as far as, what would you say is valued in the office? Is it the technical skill, the soft skill, or is it a mix? And you can get a perspective from them. And if there's some technical question you have, which I don't even know an example of that, but if you have a technical question, you can always ask that question. Um, so yeah, so that's um yeah, so this is yeah, to the question asked earlier by Andre, this is kind of that borderline of interviewing the interviewee. is kind of in the vein of those kind of questions. You're just asking questions either about their perspective on the position, or an early win, or even what they like. And I think those questions are fine. But you're gonna be time limited. So I still would go back to, you're gonna be time limited, even though they may not say it. Most time you really do have another interview right behind yours, and so they have to let you go. So they're going to only answer so many questions, if you ask. But I would say this is that this is okay and this is perfectly fine, but the focus should be ensuring that you're delivering the content they need to make a decision. This question right here, or you asking these questions, doesn't make or break you into a position. What will make or break you into being able to be the person that gets the position is the content you deliver during the interview. So I don't want to put too much importance on it, but it is good, but it's not the make or break of the interview. But great, thanks for asking the question. It's a really good question.
Thank you, Dr. Patrick. Now, one interesting one that came in is, and I do want to say this in advance, I'm trying to go through all of your questions. The audience has been wonderful about sending you questions. You're very popular, Dr. Patrick, and everybody is amazed and very grateful that you're taking the time to present on this topic. It's very important to everyone. That being said, this person is asking, what is a pearl of wisdom that you can share for interviewees in the unique setting of online interviews, where it isn't as easy to convey the overall personal interaction, presence, and persona that could be conveyed in an in-person interview?
Ooh, okay, good. Ask that. You could probably stop sharing the slides, but ask me the question again while we just stop
Okay.
sharing.
So, what is a pearl of wisdom that you can share for interviewees in the unique setting of online interviews where it isn't as easy to convey the overall personal interaction, presence, and persona that could be conveyed at an in person interview?
Um, so I would say this. I actually think you can get garner some of that, and this comes from, you know, real world experience that I've been doing interviews here for a while. And even though we've been doing them virtually, and you're still able to gather that from an individual. I will make note of this, and I didn't say it, but in the virtual environment, you should still dress up. Like, don't come just looking any old kind of way just because it's not virtual. And you should plan to have your camera on. If you don't know how, you should ask to request to practice. If they don't offer it, you should request it. If there's a way for you to practice utilizing whatever system it is so that you have no hiccups on that day. Um, but um yeah, the key that I would there's that pearl of wisdom, it's the same in person as it is on camera. You want to ensure you're conveying the right information. And that really is the key. All of that content that I stated, we look for it, whether it's in person or if it's on camera. We're still looking for you to answer all of the question. We're looking for you to answer to the skill. And when you don't, it is very much noted. Um, so there's nothing lacking from the virtual. You just want to make sure you do as much as you can to practice, 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 and be ready for when it is your time and time to show up. So,
Thank you, Dr. Patrick. Another question that came in is, how do you research your target company?
um, so definitely Google is one way. Um, LinkedIn is another, because you can always try to look up the company, versus looking up a person. Um, Yeah, those would be the main things. Just the internet. Use different browsers. They're going to give you different results. Um, for that particular position. And if you know someone that knows anything about them, then that's always a good, fair way to say, hey, can you share anything that you know about the company's culture that um, or the particular group that you're looking to interview with. Those are all good things or good ways to try to look for more information about your about that organization or that company. Good question.
Thank you, Dr. Patrick. Now, I know we're running out of time, but we have a few more questions on here I'm trying to get to. What is the best approach when the interviewer is 30 years younger than the applicant?
The best about the interview, the who's 30 years younger?
If the interviewer is 30 years younger than the actual person being interviewed. And I just want to preface the
Yeah.
question with a lot of people in our audience today may be seniors. And so these questions
hmm
are important to them because they think that age, is a big
So,
issue or challenge or barrier when they're looking for jobs. Can you talk to this particular audience about whether or not um, there's a different protocol when interviewing seniors, or if they should do anything different than they have in the past?
yeah, that's a really good question. So I'm gonna say real quick, and I'll keep this pretty short and concise. My mind immediately goes to age discrimination, and I just I hate that. Um, so you're trying to overcome a barrier, and that's the unfortunate aspect of it. And I think the thing that kind of becomes synonymous is going to be technology. So if this particular position really applies to some type of technology, I would just clearly identify, what your capabilities are. If you are not that familiar with technology, then I would recommend a class, and then you're able to reference the aspect of taking the class to improve your technology in the sense of that you do as much as you can to remain relevant to the times, to the position, and the like. But I would definitely hone in on what skills and the value that you bring, because there's, I'm obviously a very staunch believer in diversity, and diversity comes in different ways, and the value of diversity is bringing better solutions to very complex problems. And I would highlight that as an asset of who you are and what you can bring. But I'd still go back to the first statement. Usually, that connection to age is to technology, and so I would somehow wrap that into a response to really make sure to identify that the technology skill set is there. So.
Thank you, Dr. Patrick, for sharing that with our audience. I mean, that put me at ease. I don't know about anybody else out there, but you're right. You definitely should highlight your skill, and it's really about the skills and your knowledge and what you bring to the table versus your age. Our last question for the day is that somebody came in a little bit late to our webinar, and they want you to explain what STAR means again.
STAR stands for situation, task, action, and result. It's how you phrase your response to any question. Tell me about a time that you have spoken before many audiences. I can say that my situation is in my current position as working for the government. My task was that SER National invited me to come and speak during a virtual webinar about interviewing. My action is that I created the content, researched it myself, utilized it in my own capability, own situation, and have delivered that content. And the results is all of these individuals have benefited from sharing this presentation with SER Nationals and with you. So there.
Thank you, Dr. Patrick. I see that Raul is back on. So hello, Raul. Would you like to say anything to Dr. Patrick here in our last few seconds?
Yes, thank you again for your presentation. But before you go, there's one more question that is very key. You talked about the three things that you want the interviewer to
Mhm.
remember, to know about me, you,
Mhm.
anyone after they leave the interview. So could you repeat those, how you present that?
Yeah, so these are really just my own personal three things, and it could be any three things. But usually I will really focus in on, hey, if there's three things that the interview panel or person remembers about me, what are those three things? For me, it ends up being my passion, my commitment to the mission, and then just my flexibility, being flexible to perform, do whatever the case may be. And that's that is what my three could be, but it could be anything depending on whatever the position is. But again, just my passion to the position, commitment to the mission, and then just my flexibility. So yeah, great question.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Thank you. We have, wow, so many comments. People thank you for your time, your great presentation. They love your presentation. We have, like Melissa said, a lot of comments. To everyone that joined us, thank you again for joining us. Dr. Patrick, again, a pleasure working with you in this presentation. Melissa, thank you again. And to everyone, have a blessed day. Until then,
Thank you.
bye now.